He said that death does not exist, and for that they called him insane. But one day in his sleep Edgar Cayce died and came back. After that, his voice changed. He began to tell things that no living person could know. America, the beginning of the 20th century, the city of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. A simple farmer, the son of a shoemaker without a medical education, suddenly begins to diagnose people in his sleep, people he had never seen. The newspapers wrote, "The sleeping prophet heals at a distance, doctors from Virginia, a charlatan using suggestion." But those whose lives he saved called him the man to whom God speaks. Yet Cayce rarely spoke about what he saw between life and death. Only in the transcripts, found many years later in the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, there appear the phrases, Session number 1158, Patient absent. Cayce describes the presence of a certain being of light. One day on March 10, 1923, during a trance, he stopped breathing. The assistants, Gertrude Cayce and Dr. Albrecht, thought he had died. The pulse was gone, the body was cooling. 40 minutes passed. Suddenly his lips trembled, and a hoarse voice said, "I saw them, those who meet us after death." These words were entered into the record, and then began what no one expected. Cayce said that death is not the end. It is the moment when a person remembers who they truly are. We do not die, we simply awaken. Edgar Cayce. He described death not as darkness, but as light, so bright it burns through consciousness. At first, a blinding flash, then peace, then voices. They call not with words, but with feelings, and suddenly the person realizes they are still alive. He said, "Every soul departs the way it lived. If a person lived in fear, they are met by shadow. If with love, by light. And the most terrifying thing about death is not pain, but truth. You see everything, every word, every betrayal, every kindness left undone. It is not God who judges you, you do. Hell and heaven are not places. They are states of consciousness." Cayce. But this was not just philosophy. Listen carefully. What follows cannot be explained by any priest. He told other stories. A woman named Mary Langford from Ohio came to him in despair. After her husband's death, she heard footsteps and whispers at night. In his sleep, Cayce saw her house and said, "He has not left. He stands by the bed because you won't let him go." A week later, Mary burned an old letter in which she blamed herself for his death. Since then, the footsteps disappeared. We hold the dead with fear, but love lets them go. Cayce. He said he saw many layers beyond life. On the lower levels, those who cannot let go of the earth. They wander nearby, feeling us, but having no form. It is them whom you call ghosts. And higher, the spheres of light. There the souls rest. They are shown the life they lived as a film, and they decide to return or to stay. Imagine a moment in which you see everything you have done and understand why. Scary? Now imagine that this awaits everyone. Don't rush to close the video. Next, Cayce will tell who exactly created death and why. Cayce said that death was not created by God, but by the soul itself. It is a tool. Without death, life cannot be understood. Without loss, love. Without pain, compassion. We chose to die ourselves so that we could remember why we live. Record number 1396. In 1931, during one of the trances held in Norfolk, Virginia, Cayce uttered a phrase that stenographer Mary Davis wrote down with a trembling hand. "Death is not a punishment, it is an exam for the maturity of the soul." After that, the lights in the room flickered, and one of the assistants shouted, "My God, he's levitating!" Cayce's body really rose a few centimeters, or so the witnesses claimed. A minute later, everything became still, and he whispered, "Every death is agreed upon in advance. No one leaves by accident." He said he had seen maps of lives, where destinies intertwine like wires in a vast system. Each person is a spark, and when it goes out, what remains is not emptiness, but a trace. A trace is experience, energy, a vibration that creates new lives. A person does not disappear, he changes form, as water changes ice. Cayce. To understand what he meant, imagine this. You stand before a mirror, and instead of your reflection, you see everything you have ever felt, all at once, and you cannot look away. That is what the moment of transition looks like, he said. In one of the sessions, record number 1420, Cayce told a story that shocked even the doctors from Rochester. A boy who had died of fever appeared to him in a dream and said, "I didn't want to leave, but they showed me. If I had stayed, my mother would have died of grief." Cayce wept and wrote down, "Souls sometimes leave to save others. If you've watched this far, don't rush." Because next, he tells what happens to consciousness at the moment when the heart stops. Cayce said he saw it from the inside, as if he had lived through death himself. He lay down on the couch to conduct a regular session. The assistants were recording his every word, as always. But that day he didn't wake up on time. The pulse was gone. The pupils didn't respond to light. 20 minutes passed, 30, 40. Silence. And suddenly his lips began to move. The voice was dull, as if someone else was speaking. "I see the light. It is calling, but it's not the light you know." He said he was above his own body. Looking down, he saw himself, without breath, without movement. Around him, not darkness, but a transparent, pulsating silence. It was breathing. I felt that it could see me. Try to imagine this. You stand above yourself and see your own life like a trembling mirage. You want to scream, but there is no sound. There is only vibration, like an electric current in the air. I became the light that observes itself. Cayce. And if you feel cold from these words, that's normal, because next he will tell what the soul feels when it stops breathing. Don't turn away. The next part is both the scariest and the purest at the same time. He said that at the moment when his heart stopped, he saw himself from the outside, not as a body, as energy woven from memories, and suddenly he understood. No one dies alone. Each is met by what they believed in. Cayce. He saw figures approaching him, not frightening, quiet like the wind in a field. They had no faces, yet radiated familiarity. "I knew them all," he said later. "They were the ones I had helped." His assistant, Gertrude, wrote down his words, weeping, because at that very moment the lamps in the hall began to flicker and the instruments crackled as if someone were touching electricity. "He's not alone here," she said. Cayce described that the light he entered was not heavenly. It did not warm, did not blind, it knew. This light saw through me every fear, every word said in vain. And it was at that moment, he said, that the soul experiences everything at once, not in frames, but in feelings. You feel the pain of those you have caused it to, the love of those you never had time to embrace, and most of all, you understand that there is no judge. You yourself are the judgment and the sentence. Judgment does not punish, it awakens. Cayce. But the strangest thing began afterward. He saw others, those who could not leave. They stood on the border between light and darkness, like lost children, and each whispered the same thing. "I'm not ready." Cayce wrote that these are souls stuck between worlds. They are not held by God. We hold them, with our pain, with our fear. One day, a mother from New York, Mrs. Bailey, came to him. Her daughter had died in a fire, but every evening the house smelled of smoke. Cayce entered a trance and said, "She's standing by the door, waiting for you to stop calling her." After that, the smell disappeared. To let go means to love for real. Cayce. He said that at the edge of the light, something watches. Not God, not an angel. A presence, cold but not evil. Curiosity without emotion. It studies us the way we study the atom. And there, between flashes of light and shadows, Cayce heard a question. "Are you ready?" "For what?" he answered in thought. "For the truth." He saw a field in which millions of sparks rose and fell, like the breathing of the ocean. Each spark, a life, and each returned back. We come to remember, we leave to understand. Record number 1464. Cayce claimed that death is the breathing of the universe, life, the exhale, death, the inhale, and between them, us. If you feel a strange calm right now, it's not a coincidence. That's how consciousness reacts when it hears the truth it has long known. But don't turn off yet. Next, Cayce will tell for the first time about whom he saw beyond the light, about the force he called the mirror of God, and it will change everything you thought about good and evil. He said it quietly, as if he were afraid of the very sound of his words. The devil is not God's enemy. It is his reflection. In that second, even the hands of the clocks in the room froze. The lamp blinked, and for a moment it seemed that the air crackled like before a storm. Assistant Gertrude Cayce later wrote in her diary, "I felt as if a third someone was standing between us and watching." After this revelation, the churches turned away from him. Priests called his words heresy. The Louisville Herald in 1934 printed, "The prophet from Kentucky says that the devil is part of God." But Cayce only smiled. Truth is not afraid of light. He said that beyond life there is neither heaven nor hell. There is equilibrium, a force that keeps all living things in balance. And what we call evil is not hatred, but a test. Light creates shadow not because it hates, but because without darkness, no one will see the light. In one of the last trances, record number 1527, Cayce said, "I crossed the boundary again, and there beyond the light I felt a presence. It is not a person, it is not good and not evil, it simply is." A voice sounding within said, "You call me the enemy, but I am part of the equation." Before his eyes flashed images, cities, wars, catastrophes, and the voice said, "You call this evil, but it is the consequence of choice. I merely reflect what you create." Cayce understood, the devil does not punish, it mirrors, it does not destroy. It waits to see whether a person can withstand the light they themselves have brought forth. When a person receives power, at that moment the devil looks into them and waits. He said he saw souls passing through trials of light. Those who used power for others became brighter, and those who were greedy and cruel dimmed until their own light turned into fire. That is how demons are born, not somewhere else, within us. He asserted, God is the frequency of creation. The devil is the frequency of reflection. One creates, the other shows how ready you are not to destroy what has been created. During one of the private sessions, January 1938, his student Henry Ellis recorded Cayce's words on a phonograph, "I feel he is near." Ellis later told friends that that night the electricity in the house went out, but the lamp above the table kept burning for a few more minutes after the power cut. In his diary, Cayce wrote, "When I see light and darkness together, they do not fight. They breathe, like two lungs of one being. Without one, the other does not exist." At one of the last sessions he was asked, "What did you see where the light meets the darkness?" He answered, "Silence, there is no fear in it, only the understanding that everything is one." The students did not understand. Some left, and Cayce looked into the emptiness and said, "Hell is not a place. It is your own mistakes returned to you." He often repeated a phrase that frightened even those close to him. Death is not a punishment. It is an act of mercy. He explained that death does not come as an enemy, but as a medicine. When the soul is stuck in suffering, death is the hand that leads it out. That is why no one dies by accident. The soul always chooses the time of departure. Sometimes he was silent for hours, sitting in the dark, and whispered, "He is here again, not to frighten, to remind." His wife, Gertrude, thought he was delirious, but in the diary found after his death, there was a handwritten entry. "Today I understood, light and darkness are not enemies. They are the breathing of one mind. We call it God. If you have watched to this moment, do not close it. Because next Cayce will take the last step. He will try to cross the boundary one last time to see what lies beyond the light, and what he brought back forever changed the understanding of death. He said in a trance, "I crossed the boundary where there is neither light nor darkness, and there I understood why death exists." Session number 1602, January 2nd, 1944, Virginia Beach. The assistants recorded the start time, 22:47. Everything was as usual. Cayce lay on the couch, hands on his chest, breathing even. But after a few minutes, the pulse disappeared. The body temperature dropped sharply. "We thought he was dead," his secretary Gladys Davis later wrote. "The air became thick, almost electric, and suddenly a sharp inhale, a voice, but not his, deep, low, as if the ether itself was speaking. Life is the dream of the soul. Death is its awakening." Cayce's body trembled. The assistant screamed, but he did not respond. Only after 40 minutes did his lips speak. "I saw what lies beyond the light." He described that place as a silent space without form or color. There is no sound, no time, not even thought, only presence. And within that presence, everything. "I understood that God is not a person. It is the mind experiencing itself through us." He saw millions of sparks, souls, connected in one living field. Each one, a feeling, a memory, an experience. They rose and fell like the breathing of the ocean. Death is an inhale. Life is an exhale. And between them, us. Cayce said that a person does not die only once. We die every day, in fears, in regrets, in anger, and each time we are called to return to ourselves. When the mind grows silent, truth begins. He said he saw how souls, after thousands of incarnations, became pure consciousness. They are no longer born, nor do they die. They are part of the great mind from which everything began. We are not guests in the universe. We are the universe itself, observing itself. And then he heard a question that made his heart stop. "Now that you know why death exists, what will you tell people?" He answered, "I will tell them there is nothing to fear, because no one ever dies." After that session, he did not regain consciousness for almost a day. And when he opened his eyes, he said to Gertrude, "Now I understand. Death has no creator. It is the breath of love." These words became the last entry in his notebook. He died 2 days later, peacefully in his sleep, on January 3rd, 1945. On the table lay a sheet of paper with a single phrase, "There is no death, there is only transition." A witness, neighbor William Hopkins, told reporters, "I saw a soft glow above his house for a moment, like a bluish mist, and then silence." The clocks in Cayce's house stopped exactly at 3:03. A minute later, they started again. His students said, "He went home." But some swore that at night, in Cayce's study, a whisper could still be heard, not a prayer, a breath. Man does not die. He simply changes vibration. Sometimes, Cayce said, if you listen to true silence, without sounds, without thoughts, you can hear the breathing of light. Not yours, not someone's nearby, just breathing. Maybe it is him, the mind that looks through us when we look at the sky. And perhaps, when our time comes, we will hear the same question Cayce heard. Do you understand why you die? And maybe we will answer, yes, to finally learn how to live.